Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming to the Three Rivers Bridge dedication. This has been a long-awaited trip to get here. First, I want to thank everyone for being here on this really hot and humid day, but it's definitely worth it. The rain held out, so that's awesome. And I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to especially thank Representative Smola, Senator Oliveira, Town Council members. I'd like to recognize AMVET State Commander Ed Wyzik, American Legion Commander Bill Horvath, and all the town council members that are here in attendance, and our town manager, Brad Brothers.
My uncle's sister, Teresa.
The last surviving sister.
And the last surviving sister of Ignacy S. Pobieglo, Teresa. Thank you for being here. So when I first became the Veteran Service Officer in January 16th of 2023, one of the first people that I met was Rick. And that is the nephew of Ignacy S. Pobieglo. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. He was the driving force, and I know his cousins were, and all of his family have backed him up. For the last 3 years, I know he's presented this to the town. And I know he said since 1980, the family's been researching this. And I think it's absolutely amazing all the research that he's done and has brought forth to not only show the history of his uncle, but the unit that he was in and the entire, the military, what they did, and really spotlighted each and every part of it. It's absolutely amazing. I was fortunate to go to Normandy and see these hallowed grounds. It was just amazing. And then I was able to talk to Rick because he went as well at a different time. So it's pretty profound. So to get this moving along, I would like to now introduce Rick to come on up.
I think we're good. Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Should it be up louder? Or you want me to yell? I can yell. I'd just like to say a few words about Uncle Iggy. The first thing I'd like to say is the word bridge. Now, what is a bridge? A bridge is something that supports a road that goes over either water, a valley. I mean, there's plenty of things that a bridge is used for. But Uncle Iggy's mission while he was in France was to assist the British commandos in capturing the 3 bridges that go into Carrington. Now, if anybody's done any research, Carrington is the town that is just before Normandy and Utah Beach. So if they could stop the German tanks from rolling across the bridges, then there'd be much more Americans that would have died. And that was his mission. He was a very great kid. We never get to meet him, but the stories our parents told about him was he cared about everybody. He wasn't out there for himself. He was a member of the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles, one of our country's first Screaming Eagles. We went to Camp Toccoa in Georgia, where he trained alongside the Band of Brothers. His colonel was Colonel Sink, which is, if anybody has seen the Band of Brothers, Colonel Sink is the commander in the Band of Brothers. Well, that was Uncle Iggy's commander. And also in Uncle Iggy's, he was an H company. He had a gentleman called Ed Shames. And if you've watched the Band of Brothers, Colonel Ed Shames is the colonel that he had. He was a sergeant back then, and he's the one who actually wrote up the death of Iggy on June 23rd, 1944. He was D-Day plus 17, and he was in headquarters company. Just 22-year-old kid going over there and doing his job. None of us actually, maybe my aunt remembers him. She's probably the only one here that remembers him. But he did a lot of, he sacrificed his own life for everybody's tomorrow. And there's an old saying, he sacrificed his life for your tomorrow. And now I'm going to make this real short. We never thought he would have the energy or the nerve to jump out of a perfectly fine airplane. Now, it must take somebody special to do that. I know I couldn't do it. And I'm sure a lot of people out there could never do it to this day. And there probably are some guys out here that have done it before. All right. So like I said, he was an original Screaming Eagle. When they left Camp Toccoa, they ended up marching all the way to Fort Benning. And there was approximately 139 miles in 75 hours. That's still a world record to this day. So that's one of the records he holds. The other record he has, or privilege he had, was he jumped for General Eisenhower and Winston Churchill. They put on a demonstration jump for the General and Churchill. And he was one of the guys that were picked to jump that day. So he was lucky enough. We have that in the letter, actually. We have some letters in the back later. If you'd like, you can look at some of his stuff. Is that it? Anybody else have any questions? No? What's your question?
At what time did he jump?
He jumped just after midnight. They were actually, that's the other thing. He jumped out of Exeter Airfield in England. There was only 45 planes that left that day, and they actually left on the 5th. And they were in Normandy approximately 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. Trying to think. Well, anyways, there was actually, the main base that most of the planes left out of was a Pottery Airfield. The Pottery Airfield had 750 planes and gliders that flew out of there that night. And Exeter had they were called Pathfinders. Now the Pathfinders were guys that landed before everybody else and put beacons out so that the planes knew or had an idea where to drop the guys. So he was in with those guys, and he was also went in with the Filthy 13. Now the Filthy 13 was our first demolition company that this country has ever had. But the word Filthy 13 doesn't count. There was 20 or 22 of them at one time. And the reason they were called the Filthy 13 is they wouldn't take a bath. While they were in England, they were limited to how much water they could use for bathing. And so their company, what they would do is they would save all their water. And one of the guys, his name is Jake McNeese. He was an Indian from Oklahoma. And Jake was in charge of the Filthy 13, if anybody's ever read any of the books. He would go out at night and kill deer and bring them back to the guys, and they'd be eating deer for supper. And what they would use the water for was they'd fish. He was a great fisherman also, so they would fish too for fish for the guys to eat. So he almost got caught though. The day he had the bobbies from town, they questioned him underneath the tree. And while he's answering their questions, 2 deer were hanging up above his head, and the bobbies never saw it. So we got to give him a lot of credit. Those are the type of the guys. Now those guys also were boxers. They were guys that were known to kill with their bare hands. And those are pretty much the guys that trained most of the paratroopers from Toccoa. And that's about it. Thank you. Now I'd like my cousin to stand up and say a few words. This is Ed Prisbition.
Get this stuff out here.
You good?
Yeah. My memory isn't as good anymore. I got to write this stuff down. First of all, let me say that it's an honor for me to have the chance to say a few words about why we're here. Is this on? Yep. Can you hear me? Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. But before I do that, we would like to thank all of you for taking time out of your weekends to be here today. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank and remember our late cousin Felix Banis for his decades of research and hard work in keeping our Uncle Iggy's memory alive. It was through his tireless efforts and dedication in collecting, organizing, and preserving the many pieces of information and irreplaceable artifacts that this is made possible. His humor and his wit are truly missed. And a special thank you to all those who so generously contributed to this project. It is funded entirely through private donations. Also a big thank you to Commander Paul Gravelin and all the men and women of the AMVETS Post 74 of Three Rivers. Along with Tony Silva and the Sons of AMVETS, and also Jen and the whole Homefront Strong organization. We would also like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Helene and all the staff at the Palmer Public Library, whose Palmer Villages and Palmer Voices series went a long way to getting our Uncle Iggy's story out to the public. These organizations all went above and beyond in their help and support for this effort, and we can never thank them enough. Thank you all. When my brother Steve, Rick, and I years ago decided that we should undertake this project, we had no idea of the huge amount of positive support we would receive from the community, the Palmer Town Council, friends and family, and these great veterans organizations. The response was heartwarming. And again, without each and every one of you, this would not have been possible. Thank you all. Our uncle Ignacy S. Pobieglo was a part of that greatest generation of Americans. He was born and raised right here in Three Rivers, about a 10-minute walk away from here. Iggy was one of 10 brothers and sisters who grew up in the midst of the Depression. He joined the Army and volunteered for the paratroops in 42, and was assigned to the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, commanded by Colonel Robert Sink, which was later attached to the 101st Airborne Division, both of which had not yet at that time had their histories written. Of the 7,000 or so men to volunteer for the paratroops and get assigned to the 506 at Camp Toccoa, Georgia, Iggy was one of just over 2,000 soldiers who successfully completed the 13 weeks of what was the most rigorous and physically demanding training the Army had to offer at the time. Those men moved on to Fort Benning, Georgia, where most would earn their jump wings, officially becoming U.S. Army paratroopers. As an interesting side note, Iggy, along with the rest of the 3rd Battalion of the 506, embarked on a forced march in December weather with weapons and full packs from Camp Toccoa to Atlanta and then on to Fort Benning, Georgia, a distance of approximately 138 miles in just over 3 days, shattering a previous record held by the Imperial Japanese Army. Months later, he sailed on to England aboard the converted troop ship HMS Samaria. Many more months of intensive weapons and infantry training, including practice jumps and full combat gear and night jumps, followed after arriving in England, all in preparation for what he and other members of the Allied Expeditionary Force knew would come. Most of us have seen the images and newsreel footage of these brave young men, most of them teenagers, others barely out of their teens, with the fate of the free world on their shoulders, loaded down with equipment, preparing to board their transport aircraft to take off toward an uncertain outcome in an enemy-occupied foreign country. PFC Ignacy Pobieglo survived the initial 101st Airborne combat jump into Normandy, France, on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and fought with the 506th until he was killed in action on D+17, June 23, 1944, near Carentan, France, just 2 months after his 22nd birthday. Our hope is that this plaque will serve as a reminder to future generations of Americans, both young and old, of what PFC Ignacy Pobieglo and the other men and women of the greatest generation sacrificed in the name of freedom. What they did was extraordinary, but why they did it was inspiring. They quite literally saved the world. Together, they liberated and rescued countless oppressed and abused men, women, and children of all nationalities around the globe from the tyranny that was taking hold around the world. The why, I think, could best be articulated by something that was said many, many years ago by another great American named John Quincy Adams. Quoting here, "I have to study politics and war so that my sons can study mathematics, commerce, and agriculture, so their sons can study poetry, painting, and music. They did it so that people around the world could live free." Iggy knew, as all in that generation knew, that freedom does have a cost. Freedom really isn't free or guaranteed. That from time to time, brave men and women must step forward and defend that freedom. God bless men like Ignacy S. Pobieglo, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ed and Rick, for that history. In these days, we need to remember our history. It's trying to be wiped away from us. And these events, and with youngsters like this, and I was so happy he asked a question, that we need to remember things like this. It might be hard for us to go backwards and think about it, but we really need to remember the sacrifice that these men and women have made in the past. I'd like to now welcome up Representative Smola. He would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here with all of you today and my good friend, Senator Jake Oliveira from the Massachusetts Senate. It's fitting for me to be here because I am a born and bred Three Riveran. So we were just talking a few minutes ago, and I like to call Three Rivers the capital of Palmer. Unless I'm in Thorndike or Bondsville. But thank you very much, all of you, for being here. This is certainly a very fitting day for a very wonderful individual. I didn't know who Iggy was. Like most of us that are here, we had never even heard that name before. Until a letter a few years ago came into my office in Boston to tell me about Iggy's story, a really extraordinary story, with a mission of naming this bridge in his honor. And I then struck up a relationship with Rick for a long period of time to talk more and learn more about what Iggy's past was all about, his roots in the community. And the town of Palmer opened its doors, came here, and were responsible for helping to make this become an official landmark that this community can honor for many, many years. I hope that this bridge will not just hold the name of Iggy, but that it will be a teaching tool, one that we can use for future generations. We have so many wonderful landmarks and monuments in the town of Palmer all across its villages after people named after individuals that have served this country honorably, but unfortunately never came home. And they left a lot of things behind in this community in order to sacrifice everything that they had in order to make sure that we are the freest and the fairest country on the earth. They were very ordinary individuals that were asked to do some very extraordinary things. And very much we wish that we weren't here today to name this bridge after Iggy. But we are happy that his family is here today to be able to keep the legacy of this family going. I was honored on Memorial Day to be able to meet Iggy's younger sister that's here with us, Teresa. It's wonderful, and I think many people had met Teresa for the first time as well here in the town of Palmer. There are strong roots that come from Iggy's family, and we are proud that Three Rivers will hold up this bridge for many years to come in his name. Teach your kids Iggy's story and so many stories like Iggy's, because it tells you everything you need to know about the greatness of our country, that as we utilize its privileges, as we move around every single day, we are able to say what we want to say, do what we want to do, practice what we want to practice, walk into any church that we choose. We get those rights and those opportunities by men and women that are willing to wear that uniform and do that which we as individuals are not willing to do on behalf of ourselves. They leave their todays behind so that we can have all of our tomorrows, and it's hugely important. And Senator Oliveira and I, as we go in to do our job in the legislature every single day, we are mindful of the sacrifice that veterans make, and we never forget that this country and our Constitution wouldn't exist without the sacrifice of men and women that are willing to do everything on our behalf. So I'm proud on behalf of the Massachusetts House and Senate, on behalf of Senator Oliveira and I, to present this citation to Iggy posthumously. This is the citation that he would have received had he come home after his service, which reads, be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House and Senate offers its sincerest congratulations to PFC Ignacy Iggy Pobieglo in recognition of extraordinary heroism in action, display of personal bravery, devotion to duty, and extreme sacrifice and service to the United States of America. To Iggy and to your family, thank you for your service and what you do here for the community, because we are the greatest community, the greatest commonwealth, and the greatest country because of people like Iggy. God bless him. Thank you. My very good friend, Senator Jake Oliveira, who has roots in the town of Palmer. We're proud of those roots. And he doesn't live too far away from us here in Three Rivers, just over another bridge in the town of Ludlow. But he has been an outstanding partner, first serving with him in the House of Representatives and now in the Senate, my good friend, Senator Jake Oliveira.
Thank you, Rep. Samola. I can't honestly call myself a Three Riveran, but my grandfather was born here. He actually was born in Three Rivers and then moved just down the river a little bit on Green Street, so that's where my family's roots are. He himself was a World War II veteran. He was a little bit older. He was in his 30s when he signed up and enlisted in the United States Army and actually served in Burma in India and was a mechanic there. So he brought his skills back to the United States here and worked right down the road in Thorndike over at the factory that made the egg cartons for many years, and that's where he retired from. But my other grandfather actually saw combat in the Pacific Theater. He was in the United States Marine Corps and signed up at the ripe old age of 16. Lied about his age, and because he was a little guy like I am as well and was really thin, I couldn't even button his jacket when I put it on, but he served in Grumman Avengers and was a gunner in the back, so they strafed a lot of Japanese transport ships. He was based out of Wake Island, was based out of Peleliu, and a few others as we began our ascent on Japan. But I think it's important to take stock that there are so few of our World War II veterans that are left right now. I had the honor of opening up a new post 9/11 dog park for veterans in the city of Chicopee and met a 101-year-old World War II veteran, one of the few that's left. My aunt, who signed up as part of the Women's Army Corps, is still around in San Diego on my Portuguese side. She'll be 103 in January, and she's still doing well, still gardening. But I think it's important to call attention to that greatest generation. The generation that serves selflessly for their country, but not just their country, to better their world. And there were people that served in so many different capacities, just like Iggy, people that worked in our factories that built the products that allowed us to push back against fascism, that allowed us to push back against Japan. Growing up as a history buff, I was always interested in the D-Day landings and the support troops that came beforehand to clear those bridges, to ensure that the people landing in Gold, Sword, Juneau, Omaha, and Utah beaches were able to have a foothold and to take back Europe from fascism that gripped much of that continent. And people like Iggy and their stories, when you read about the 506 and the Screaming Eagles of the 101st Airborne Division, it brings you back to what those people were doing to actually jump out of an airplane, which only was invented 41 years before jumping out of those planes. And there was always a story about the show on HBO, Band of Brothers, where they had and interviewed many of those members of the Easy Company 506 101st Airborne Division. And I can still remember a story that one of the World War II veterans was telling, saying they were at a recruiting station in his hometown, many small towns where people came from, and they were recruiting people to be in, the Marines, the Navy, the Coast Guard, various different armed services. And then someone said, would you like to sign up for the Airborne? And he said, what's the Airborne Division? And they said, well, you get up in there with all your gear and you jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Everybody said, go to hell. I'm not signing up for that. And then they told them you get an extra $50 a month, and everybody's hand went up after that. So I'm sure Iggy wasn't motivated by the extra $50, but it certainly helped people and make sure that we had people that were willing to sacrifice their own lives. And to hear the stories of the 101st Airborne Division, and you talked about Camp Toccoa, where a lot of them trained in Camp Toccoa, and the training was really brutal for them as well. They had a hill in that town in Georgia they nicknamed Currahee. And that was the nickname of the 506 Regiment in the 101st Airborne Division. And the 506 was actually called the 50 after Colonel Sink, their commander at that time. The history of the 101st Airborne Division and the 506 will continue to remain alive here in the town of Palmer, thanks to the work of your veteran service agent, thanks to the work of the town council, thanks to the work of those that have sacrificed themselves, and thanks to the AMVETS as well. So it's just an honor to represent this community and to share a little bit of history about World War II and to recognize the sacrifice and the service for all those who serve our nation. A grateful Commonwealth, a grateful community, and a grateful country. Thank all those who serve. Thank you again.
All right. So now we'd like to lay the wreath at the monument. This is Commander Paul Graveline. He is laying the wreath on the bench. Thank you. You. All right, so we are going to conclude today's ceremony. I want to thank the fire department and the police department for coming out and everyone for being here. This has been a wonderful ceremony and a great tribute to an amazing family. Thank you, Teresa, for your family's sacrifice and service. And thank you for everyone for doing the work and getting that history out there for us all to remember. And after this, the reception will be at the ANVETS. So please join them over at the ANVETS. I believe it's 2150 Main Street, if I have that correct, right down the road on the left. Thank you very much.